Imagine this. You're sitting at the airport gate. The plane has been delayed for what feels like hours, and your frustration is building up. It's a busy travel day, and everyone around you is impatient, checking their watches, groaning under their breath, some even outright complaining about the inconvenience. You can hear it all. I have a connecting flight. This is ridiculous. I'll never make it to my meeting now. As the minutes drag on, the air gets thicker with tension, and the anxiety of everyone waiting to board starts to build. And then, without warning, the speaker system crackles to life, and you hear the captain's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I know you've been waiting a while, and I'm sure you're frustrated. But let me explain why you might want to stick around for just a bit longer. What happens next? A flight delay turns into something completely unexpected, and the whole mood in the terminal shifts. In fact, by the end of this announcement, everyone who was once grumbling is now clapping, smiling, and even laughing. What could have possibly been said to transform such negative energy into pure positivity? Stay with me because by the end of the story, you're going to understand exactly what happened, and trust me, it's something you won't want to miss. This isn't just any flight delay story. It's a tale about how a single announcement from the flight crew can change everything. And the best part? You're about to get the answer in just a few moments, so keep watching. But before I dive deeper into this unusual flight delay, let me ask you something. Have you ever been stuck in one of those situations where you're just waiting for the inevitable? That feeling of being out of control, powerless, watching the clock tick by, and knowing that the longer you wait, the more your day or your plans are slipping away. We've all been there, right? Maybe you're running late for a meeting, or maybe you're heading home to see your family after a long trip. Whatever the reason, a flight delay can ruin your mood and your plans faster than you can say, I should have driven. But in this case, what happened next wasn't just a random event. No, this was something that turned the entire situation on its head in a way that no one could have predicted. Now, I know you're probably wondering what could have been said to make everyone clap and forget about their complaints. What was so special about the pilot's announcement that made everyone stop their moaning and actually cheer? I'm going to tell you exactly what that was in just a minute. But before I do, think about the last time you were in a similar situation. You know, a time when the circumstances were beyond your control and it felt like you had no choice but to sit there and wait. How did you react? Maybe you got frustrated. Maybe you felt angry or hopeless. But deep down, I bet you wish anyone could just offer a little bit of hope, a little bit of a bright spot in the middle of your waiting game. That's exactly what happened here, and the best part? The solution was so simple, yet so powerful, that it had the entire terminal reacting in a way no one expected. What if I told you that it wasn't just the announcement itself that had people clapping, but the way the pilot communicated with the passengers? You see, it's all about the human connection, the way we respond to each other in moments of frustration or adversity. We're all wired to react to kindness, understanding, and empathy, especially when we're feeling helpless. That's what this pilot did. He reached out to the passengers in a way that resonated on a deeper level than anyone could have predicted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to that moment at the gate. Picture the scene again. People are staring at their phones, scrolling through social media, checking flight statuses every few minutes. They're impatient, yes, but also feeling disconnected. They don't know what's going on, they don't know when they'll finally board, and it's only adding to the tension in the air. It's moments like these that can make or break a situation. A delay can either turn into an endless waiting game, or it can be transformed into a chance to show the passengers something more, a chance to remind everyone that they're all in this together. And that's exactly what happened that day. As the captain began speaking, it wasn't just about explaining the delay. It wasn't about blaming the weather, the mechanics, or the air traffic control. No, this was different. The pilot spoke from the heart, acknowledging the frustration of the passengers, but also offering a different perspective. He didn't just deliver a generic, "Thanks for your patience" speech. Instead, he shared a personal story that resonated with the passengers on a human level. The tone was light, humorous, and yet incredibly real. And the best part? The passengers began to listen, not just to the words, but to the emotion behind them. It wasn't just a flight delay anymore. It was a moment of connection. But here's the kicker. What happened next is something that nobody saw coming. As the captain wrapped up his announcement, the entire plane erupted into applause. The mood shifted instantly, from irritation to genuine appreciation. There was laughter, high fives, and people chatting with each other as if they were long-lost friends. The magic was in the delivery, in the way the pilot understood that a little empathy could go a long way. This wasn't just a flight delay. This was a reminder that, sometimes, all it takes to change the energy of a room or an entire airport is a simple moment of connection. So, how did the pilot do it? How did he manage to turn a seemingly frustrating situation into something that left everyone feeling better? Well, the answer might surprise you. But I promise you, once you hear it, you'll understand why everyone was clapping, and maybe, just maybe, you'll even start looking at flight delays in a whole new light. Trust me, this is one story you'll want to stick around for. But before I tell you how the pilot managed to pull off this feat, let me take you through the moment right before the announcement. Picture yourself in that same airport terminal, waiting, watching the clock, and feeling the weight of the delay bearing down on you. You're probably wondering what could possibly happen next. Can anything change the situation? Will you be stuck here for even longer? It's at that point, the exact moment when hope seems lost, that something extraordinary happens. Stay with me, because the next part of the story is going to change everything you thought you knew about the power of a well-timed announcement. As the pilot's announcement echoed through the terminal, the passengers were momentarily distracted from the delay, but the underlying tension was still there, lingering in the air like a cloud that couldn't quite dissipate. People had been waiting for hours, and for most, the thought of a delay was just the beginning of what was going to be a long and frustrating day. Some passengers were on tight schedules, trying to make connections, while others were desperate to reach their destination after long flights from across the country. The mood in the room was a strange mix of impatience and uncertainty. They didn't know what was going to happen next, but they sure didn't expect what was coming. As you're probably starting to realize, the situation didn't just happen overnight. The seeds of this story had been planted much earlier, though in ways that no one could have predicted. In fact, the very events that led up to this fateful flight had been brewing for quite some time. The passengers weren't just frustrated by the delay. They were, in a way, caught in the middle of a much bigger picture. You see, this wasn't just a regular flight, and it wasn't just a regular pilot. There were things going on behind the scenes that would only start to make sense much later. Before the delay, before the announcements, there was a much more personal conflict unfolding. The pilot, Captain Michael Davis, was no stranger to pressure. In fact, in the days leading up to this flight, he had been juggling a lot more than just the normal responsibilities of flying an aircraft. At the start of the week, he had been dealing with some serious personal issues, things that had been weighing on him heavily. His marriage, for instance, was on the rocks. His wife, Jennifer, had been distant for weeks, and though he tried to keep up appearances, the cracks in their relationship were becoming impossible to ignore. He had been spending long hours away from home, trying to keep the peace in his personal life while managing the increasingly demanding schedule of his job. And like so many of us, he had been carrying that stress, hoping it would somehow resolve itself on its own. But as it often happens in life, it didn't. In the days leading up to this flight, Captain Davis found himself faced with the reality that his marriage might be on the verge of falling apart. The conversations had become colder, more distant, with no real resolution in sight. He was aware of the growing disconnect, but there wasn't much he felt he could do. He tried to focus on his work, on his passengers, on keeping things professional, but the weight of his personal life was always there, creeping into his thoughts. Little did anyone know, this inner turmoil would play a crucial role in the way he would handle the announcement during the delay. And then there was the incident just a few days before the flight, a situation that would later make people question whether everything that had happened was truly a coincidence. It started when Captain Davis received a call from his estranged brother, Mark. The two hadn't spoken in years, and the tension between them was palpable, but Mark had reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet up. The conversation had been brief, but emotionally charged. Mark had been dealing with his own demons, and although Captain Davis was still reeling from his own personal struggles, he agreed to meet with him. What happened during that conversation left Davis shaken. His brother had shared details about a business deal gone wrong, a deal that had led to some unsavory people getting involved. It was clear that Mark was in trouble, and though he didn't ask for help directly, the implication was there. Davis had tried to reassure him, but the meeting only left him more conflicted. You're probably starting to wonder, what does any of this have to do with a delayed flight, right? Well, that's where the mystery thickens. Just a few hours before boarding, Davis had learned that his brother had gone missing. The situation was serious, and even though he knew he had a job to do, the news weighed heavily on his mind. He was supposed to be focusing on his passengers, on making sure the flight went smoothly, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Mark. Was he in danger? Where was he? The uncertainty gnawed at him, and as the flight got delayed, his stress and anxiety only deepened. But he couldn't let anyone know. He couldn't let his passengers see any cracks in his professional facade. Now, as you can imagine, the mood in the terminal wasn't getting any better. The frustration from the passengers was building up, and as the minutes stretched into hours, it seemed like the situation was only going to get worse. Passengers grumbled louder, checked their phones more frequently, and some even began complaining to the staff. And that's when something strange started to happen. The airline staff had been tight-lipped about the cause of the delay, but there was a certain nervous energy in the air that suggested there was more going on than they were letting on. The staff members exchanged quiet whispers, their eyes flicking nervously to the cockpit as if expecting something to happen, but no one knew exactly what. Even the flight attendants seemed tense, though they did their best to maintain their professionalism. As the minutes turned into hours, a sense of uncertainty settled in. But here's where things started to get interesting. While passengers were busy checking the status of other flights, discussing possible alternatives, and some even resorting to heated arguments with the airline staff, one of the gate agents stepped up to the mic and made an announcement that would set the stage for what was to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," the agent said, "we've been informed that there's been a minor issue with the aircraft, but rest assured, everything is being handled. We expect a delay, but we'll keep you updated as soon as we know more." The words "minor issue" were enough to send ripples of concern through the crowd. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make people start looking at each other, exchanging glances, and whispering amongst themselves. Was the delay just a technical issue? Or was there something bigger going on? Could the plane have had a mechanical issue? Or was there something else behind the scenes? The questions started to pile up, but no one seemed to have answers. As the minutes ticked by, passengers began to settle into a state of uneasy resignation. They were still hopeful, still wondering if there was a chance that the situation would somehow resolve itself, but in the back of their minds, they were all starting to doubt. But then, just as the frustration reached its peak, the announcement came. It wasn't from a gate agent or an attendant. It was from the cockpit. The pilot, Captain Davis, took the microphone, his voice cutting through the growing murmur of the crowd. And when he spoke, it was as if the entire atmosphere shifted. What was said next would forever change the way the passengers viewed the delay, the flight, and even the people around them. But to understand why that announcement had such an impact, you need to know more about what was going on in the background. Something was unfolding behind the scenes, something that not only explained the delay, but also had a deeper, more personal connection to the passengers than anyone realized. The mystery of what was going on behind the scenes had only just begun to unravel. Keep watching because the real twist is about to come. What Davis revealed next would leave everyone in the terminal with more questions than answers, and the plot thickened just when they thought it couldn't get any more intense. What was the real reason for the delay? And how is this moment tied to a much bigger story that no one had expected? The answers are coming, but you'll have to stay with me to find out. Just as the passengers in the terminal were beginning to process the unexpected turn of events, things took a sharp, unnerving twist. Captain Davis had barely finished his announcement when the terminal seemed to freeze in time. People were still digesting his words, trying to piece together what had been said, when something happened that no one could have predicted. The tone in the room shifted again, this time a palpable sense of unease spreading like wildfire. It wasn't just the delay anymore. Something deeper, darker was starting to unfold right before their eyes. Captain Davis had mentioned something about a personal matter, but he left it at that. He told the passengers that he understood their frustration and promised to keep them informed, but his words seemed to linger in the air, haunting those who heard them. However, as the announcement ended and passengers slowly started to shuffle back to their seats, there was a subtle shift in the air. Suddenly, a few of the staff members began to act strangely. It was almost as if they were avoiding eye contact with each other. They exchanged hurried glances, some of them murmuring in low voices. One of the gate attendants, a woman named Claire, looked around nervously, her hands shaking slightly as she fumbled with the boarding passes. A few moments later, Claire was pulled aside by a colleague, and though their conversation was low and guarded, the tension in the air was undeniable. Claire was clearly shaken, and she kept glancing back towards the cockpit, as if worried that someone might overhear. As she spoke, the murmurs of the passengers started to grow louder, creating an undercurrent of suspicion. A sense of distrust was beginning to cloud the atmosphere, and it wasn't just the delay anymore. It was the mystery surrounding the pilot and the unexplained tension among the staff. Something was off, but no one was willing to speak up. Then, in the midst of all this, a critical piece of evidence disappeared. It started innocently enough, a forgotten folder, misplaced documents, something minor that could have been overlooked. But when Claire went to check the flight logs in the back office, she discovered that some of the most crucial information about the plane's previous maintenance checks had been wiped from the system. This wasn't just a glitch or a mistake. The data was gone, erased, and no one knew who could have done it. Claire immediately tried to report it, but the airline's IT system seemed to be malfunctioning as well, as if someone was deliberately trying to cover their tracks. Claire knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just a mistake. Something was being hidden, and she could feel the weight of it settling heavily on her shoulders. As Claire tried to dig deeper into what was happening, someone who had been lurking in the background for much of the day, approached her with a warning. It was a man she'd only met a few times, a flight attendant named Ryan. He had always been a bit of an enigma, and though he was friendly enough, there was something about him that felt off. His smile never quite reached his eyes, and his casual demeanor often hid a deeper, more unsettling presence. Ryan pulled Claire aside, his voice hushed, as though speaking too loudly might expose something. "You don't want to get involved in this," he told her, his words laden with a strange sense of urgency. "Trust me, this is bigger than any of us. The less you know, the safer you'll be. Let it go." Claire was taken aback. She had always trusted her instincts, and something about Ryan's tone unsettled her. Why was he warning her now? What was he trying to protect? His cryptic words only deepened the mystery, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan knew more than he was letting on. Was he part of something bigger? Was he somehow connected to the disappearance of the flight data? Or was he simply trying to protect himself from the consequences of something much darker lurking in the shadows? Claire was torn. She didn't want to get involved, but she also couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that the truth was slipping further and further away, and every moment she hesitated, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to be getting more and more scattered. As if the situation wasn't already complicated enough, another unexpected obstacle appeared. The airline's corporate office had issued a directive, one that was practically impossible to ignore. All staff were ordered to cease any further investigation into the situation. The memo was vague, yet its message was clear. No one was to ask questions, and no one was to talk about the incident involving the pilot or the flight's delay. If they did, it was implied, they would be dealt with swiftly. This order came straight from the top, and it made Claire's blood run cold. She could sense the weight of it, the feeling that a powerful hand was at play, one that was controlling the narrative, manipulating the truth. It was as if they were trying to bury something, and the more they tried to control it, the more it felt like the situation was spiraling out of control. But who was behind this? Was it the airline's higher-ups trying to protect their reputation? Or was it someone with a much more personal agenda? The deeper Claire delved, the more questions she had, and the more she realized that she might be in over her head. Every lead seemed to evaporate as quickly as it appeared, and the closer she got to the truth, the more the walls seemed to close in around her. She couldn't ignore the fact that Ryan's warning hadn't been a random remark. Someone didn't want her digging any deeper. As Claire pondered what to do next, a chilling discovery threw everything into chaos. She overheard a conversation between two men in a quiet corner of the terminal, their voices barely above a whisper. They were speaking about the missing flight data, and one of them mentioned something that made her blood run cold. He's not the only one who's going to disappear. Before Claire could react, the men spotted her. Their eyes locked with hers for a split second, and the eerie silence that followed was enough to make her heart race. They quickly turned away and vanished into the crowd, but the words they had spoken hung in the air like a heavy fog. Was someone's life in danger? Was this all about more than just a delayed flight? What were they trying to cover up? At that moment, Claire realized something. This wasn't just a story about a flight delay. This was about something much bigger. And whatever it was, the clock was ticking. Time was running out, and if she didn't act fast, she might never uncover the truth. But what if the people she thought she could trust weren't who they appeared to be? What if Ryan had his own reasons for warning her to stop? And most importantly, what was the connection between the missing flight logs, the strange men in the terminal, and the pilot who had given his announcement moments earlier? This story was no longer just about a flight delay. It had become a game of survival, and Claire was starting to realize that the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it would become. The answers she sought were out there, but they were hidden beneath layers of deception, and every time she thought she was closer to the truth, the walls kept closing in. What happened next would set the stage for a twist no one could have seen coming. As Claire continued to mull over the cryptic conversation between the two men, a chilling thought began to seep into her mind. What if the mystery wasn't just about her? What if this entire situation, this massive web of secrecy and deception, was bigger than she could ever imagine? She couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone else was lurking in the shadows, pulling strings, orchestrating events from behind the scenes. Claire wasn't the only one involved in this twisted game, and the realization made her heart race even faster. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth for herself anymore. It was about protecting those she cared about from being swept up in the storm that was growing larger by the second. The next day, things took an unexpected turn. As Claire walked through the terminal, trying to piece together what little information she had, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. At first, she thought it was just another update about the flight delay, a routine notification meant to ease the passengers' growing frustration. But as she opened the message, her breath caught in her throat. The message wasn't from the airline, it wasn't even from someone she knew. It was anonymous, a chilling warning that sent a wave of dread crashing over her. Stop digging. It's not just your life at stake anymore. Someone you care about is next. Her pulse quickened as she read the words again. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever had sent this message knew exactly what she had been investigating, and they were making it clear that there would be consequences if she didn't stop. But just as quickly as the fear began to rise in her chest, another, more troubling thought began to take root. This wasn't just a warning for Claire. Whoever had sent it knew her well enough to know what she valued most. But who else was connected to this story? And who else could be dragged into this mess if she didn't tread carefully? It didn't take long for her to find the answer, though it came in the most unexpected way. Later that day, Claire received a call from her older brother, Adam, who worked as a security analyst in a nearby city. He had never been directly involved with her work, but they kept in touch regularly. But today, his voice was different. Urgent, strained, almost panicked. Claire, something strange is going on. I got a warning too. Someone's been monitoring my emails. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but I checked my logs and there's no doubt. Someone's been watching me. The blood drained from Claire's face as she listened. Adam, her older brother, wasn't the type to panic over trivial things. He was a methodical, logical person who prided himself on his ability to stay calm under pressure. But now, it sounded like he was unraveling at the seams. I don't know how they knew, but they've got access to information they shouldn't. It's like they're tracking everything I do, Adam continued. I don't want you to get involved in this, Claire. It's dangerous. We need to leave this alone. Claire's mind raced. What were the odds that Adam, someone completely disconnected from her investigation, would receive a warning just as she had? Was this a coincidence, or was someone trying to send a message to both of them? The implications were terrifying. Whoever was behind all this wasn't just targeting her, they were targeting the people she loved, people she trusted. And worse, they were using the very things that mattered most to her to manipulate her actions, to control her. Adam's warning only made things more complicated. Claire had hoped that the situation was something she could resolve on her own, but now she realized just how interconnected everything was. Her investigation was no longer about a flight delay or a missing logbook. It was about a larger, far-reaching conspiracy that seemed to be swallowing everything in its path. She had no choice but to dig deeper, but with each new piece of information, it became clear that she was being pushed further into a corner. And as if the weight of it all wasn't enough, she could feel the walls closing in, the tension mounting at every turn. As if things weren't already spiraling out of control, a new piece of evidence turned up, one that only deepened the mystery. Claire had spent hours poring over flight records, maintenance reports, and even surveillance footage, hoping to find something that would explain what had happened on the plane. She had already come across several oddities, strange anomalies in the data, suspicious delays in the maintenance schedule, but nothing that pointed directly to what she was looking for. But just as she was about to give up, something caught her eye. A seemingly innocuous email in the system, a routine communication between the flight crew and the airline's operations department, stood out like a sore thumb. It was marked as urgent, but what was more alarming was the date. The email had been sent a full week before the scheduled flight, but there was no trace of it in the airline's official records. It was as if it had been deliberately erased, hidden from view. Claire's heart pounded as she stared at the email. There was no reason for it to be wiped from the system. It wasn't like any of the documents she had seen before. This one seemed to be connected to something far more sinister. But just as she was about to take a closer look, her phone buzzed again, and her heart skipped a beat. A message from Adam. "I'm getting out of here. I don't know what's going on, but I think they're after me too. I'll be okay, but don't trust anyone right now, Claire. Don't trust anyone at all." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and Claire felt a chill run down her spine. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She wasn't the only one being targeted. Whoever was behind this conspiracy was pulling strings, manipulating not just her, but her family too. Every lead she chased, every piece of evidence she uncovered, only made the mystery more convoluted. And just when she thought she might be getting closer to the truth, another twist appeared, complicating everything further. Who could she trust? Could Adam really leave before things got worse? Was there even a way to get out of this mess, or had she already been dragged too deep into something much darker than she had ever imagined? The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. Each moment she waited felt like a gamble, one that could cost her everything. The more Claire tried to unravel the truth, the more entangled she became in a web of lies, deceit, and danger. Nothing was as it seemed, and everyone around her had their own hidden agenda. The answers were out there, but they were slipping further from her reach, leaving her with more questions and more doubts than ever before. Claire hadn't felt truly afraid, viscerally, in her bones afraid, until that night. It was just past midnight when she pulled into her apartment complex, the quiet hum of the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Everything looked normal at first glance, but there was a subtle difference in the air, like a static charge that prickled against her skin and made her stomach knot with unease. She sat in the driver's seat a moment longer than usual, watching the silhouette of the stairwell outside her building, scanning for movement, for any sign of life. Then she noticed it, her front door, ajar. Just slightly, just enough. She knew she had locked it when she left. She always did. Her breath hitched in her throat. The headlights dimmed behind her as she turned off the engine, plunging the world into an eerie quietness that felt suffocating. And in that silence, something shifted. This wasn't just about mysterious emails, disappearing logs, or secretive conversations on a plane. This was real. It was personal. And it had followed her home. She didn't go inside right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone, heart hammering, and called Adam. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. The third time, her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. But the line stayed dead. That wasn't like him. Ever since he'd warned her to be careful, they had kept in close contact, checking in regularly, even if it was just a quick text. But now, it had been nearly 24 hours. No message. No missed call. No trace. A wave of nausea washed over her. She couldn't shake the image of him saying he needed to get out, that he was scared, too. And now he was gone. The fear she'd been keeping at bay suddenly flooded her senses, overwhelming and all-consuming. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of control and order, had become a crime scene. Drawers were open, papers scattered, hard drives unplugged. Her laptop was missing entirely, and worst of all, the flash drive she'd used to store her notes on the flight's anomalies, the interviews, the black box transcripts, the suspicious maintenance records, was gone too. Nothing else was stolen. Not jewelry. Not cash. Not her passport or cards. Whoever had broken in hadn't come to rob her. They came to silence her. She sank to the floor beside her overturned bookshelf, staring blankly at the mess, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, she realized how little control she had. This wasn't a story anymore. This wasn't a puzzle to be solved. It was war. Silent, invisible, but brutal. And she was outmatched. Panic gave way to paranoia. Every creak of a floorboard, every passing car, every rustle of leaves outside her window made her jump. She barely slept that night. She sat huddled on the couch with the lights off, the glow of her phone the only thing keeping her company, checking the news, searching forums, even dark web channels, looking for anything, any hint, that might explain what was happening. That's when she stumbled onto a thread buried in an anonymous message board, one dedicated to whistleblowers and former government employees. A user with a string of numbers for a handle had posted cryptic updates for weeks, sharing redacted documents and obscure clues that Claire would have dismissed before. But one of the images he shared, a blurry photo of a man at an airport gate, face turned slightly from the camera, stopped her cold. It was Adam, her brother, in a terminal. Not from this week, this was dated nearly 6 months ago. But the caption below chilled her to the core. Asset compromised. Clean exit recommended. Claire couldn't breathe. She clicked through every post this user had made, connecting dots, matching names to incidents that had once seemed disconnected. Air traffic anomalies, misreported aviation data, deaths ruled natural, that now screamed foul play. There was a pattern here. A hidden network operating beneath the surface of official narratives, manipulating information, threatening those who got too close. And Adam had known. That's why he warned her. That's why he vanished. The next morning, her phone rang from an unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. A calm voice greeted her. Polite, casual even, but the message beneath the tone was razor sharp. You've been busy, Claire. That stops now. You're not a journalist anymore. You're not a heroine in some Netflix thriller. You're just a woman who needs to decide whether she wants to wake up tomorrow with her life intact. The line went dead. She stared at the screen, heart hammering, mouth dry, struggling to make sense of it. There was no trace of the number, no clue to who it was. But the message was clear. This wasn't a game anymore. She wasn't chasing a mystery. She was the target now. Her every move was being watched. Someone had eyes on her, someone who knew her habits, her contacts, her research. And they were closing in. With nowhere else to turn, Claire decided to revisit the airport where this all began. She needed to retrace her steps. Find anything they might have missed. She booked a one-way ticket, not intending to fly, but to gain access. Once inside the terminal, it was déjà vu. The same gray seats. The same fluorescent lights. But something felt different now. The people around her seemed less like travelers and more like actors in a play she hadn't been invited to understand. She caught a man watching her near the gate. A sharp suit, earpiece barely visible, pretending to read a newspaper in a digital age where almost no one did that anymore. When she made eye contact, he didn't flinch. Just turned the page. Claire quickly ducked behind a column, blood roaring in her ears. She wasn't imagining it. She was being followed.
But why?
Why her? Why now? What did they think she knew? That's when she saw it. On the wall near the gate staff entrance, a bulletin board partially covered with notices and internal memos. Most were irrelevant: flight schedules, maintenance notices, routine safety checks. But one stood out. A printed image, low resolution, pinned sloppily in the corner. It was her face. Her face. Next to a caption: "Flag for security. Do not engage. Report sightings immediately." The ground tilted beneath her. Her knees nearly buckled. This wasn't about stopping her anymore. This was about erasing her. But why not arrest her? Why not detain her? Unless everything she had uncovered so far had only scratched the surface. What if the truth wasn't about a single flight or even a cover-up? What if she had stumbled upon something much deeper, something buried so far beneath red tape and classified files that exposing it would unravel more than just reputations? Claire backed away slowly, heart thudding so hard she could barely hear anything else. She needed to get out fast. But before she could move, her phone buzzed again. One new message. No number. Just a link. And underneath it, 5 words that sent ice through her veins. Watch. Then decide what matters. She opened the link. And what she saw changed everything. The video loaded slowly, buffering as if even the file itself hesitated to reveal what was coming. Claire sat in the back seat of a rideshare, ducked low, eyes locked on the screen, heart thumping so hard it rattled her ribs. Outside the tinted windows, the city buzzed in its usual rhythm. People sipping lattes, walking dogs, scrolling TikTok, completely oblivious to the unraveling chaos just a few feet away from them. Inside, though, Claire's entire world was about to tilt on its axis. The footage began, grainy security cam video stitched together from different angles, spliced like some underground docuseries. At first it looked like ordinary airport surveillance. But then she recognized a figure walking briskly across one frame, stopping to speak with a uniformed employee. Her blood ran cold. It was her. She remembered that moment. But what made her jaw clench was the man she was speaking to, because it was Adam, her brother, standing there, in full airport security gear. Claire froze. Her thoughts collided like traffic at a broken light. Adam hadn't worked for TSA. He was in private cybersecurity. That was the story she'd been told her entire life. But there he was, clearly comfortable, clearly in command, badge visible, his demeanor confident in a way that didn't line up with the fear he'd shown just days ago. Then the footage cut again, this time to a narrow back hallway she didn't recognize. Adam and 2 other men, in black, no IDs, wheeling a metal case through an unmarked service entrance. The timestamp? 5 hours before the flight that changed everything took off. The video ended abruptly, screen fading to black before her reflection flickered back at her like a ghost. Her skin felt ice cold. She couldn't move.
Couldn't speak.
All she could do was stare at her own stunned face in the phone screen, trying to grasp what this meant. If Adam had been there before the flight, if he had access to restricted areas, then this wasn't just about a conspiracy he had uncovered. This was about something he was part of. Had he lied to protect her? Or had he pulled her into something darker without her even knowing? The trust she'd clung to, the only person she believed was on her side, suddenly felt like a weapon used against her. Her thoughts spiraled faster than she could anchor them. What if Adam had orchestrated everything? What if the plane incident wasn't an accident or cover-up, but part of a larger operation? That might explain the bizarre security lapses, the missing records, the flash drive vanishing from her apartment, the voice on the phone threatening her with calm precision. The enemy wasn't just a faceless institution, it might be her own blood. And if that was true, it flipped the entire story upside down. She couldn't even begin to process the betrayal before her rideshare driver glanced back in a mirror, subtly but noticeably. "You sure this is the right drop-off?" he asked, eyes darting not at her but at the rearview mirror again. Claire's pulse quickened. Something about the tone felt wrong, like a line from a rehearsed script. Her original destination was her friend Melissa's house, a safe fallback she hadn't told anyone about. She'd called from a burner phone. She used a fake name on the app. No way anyone could have tracked her. And yet, Here he was, hesitating at a stop sign, waiting too long, his fingers tapping the wheel rhythmically. "I think I'll get out here," she said quickly, already grabbing her bag. She didn't wait for him to respond. She flung the door open and stepped out, slamming it shut behind her, heart racing. The car idled for a second, then drove off slowly, as if reluctant to let her go. She darted into a nearby alley, weaving through side streets until she reached a laundromat and ducked inside, pretending to check her phone while watching the door. As her breathing slowly returned to normal, she remembered something she'd almost overlooked. A moment from the airport footage, just after Adam had entered that service hallway. There was a small, fleeting image on the wall, a sign with faded letters, but she could make out the word, Argus. She'd seen that name before. Not in any public report, not on any TSA badge, but in an email she'd hacked from a decommissioned flight software server 2 weeks earlier. It was buried in a system error log linked to predictive analytics software, AI that supposedly monitored behavioral patterns on flights for national security purposes. And now, that name had appeared again, connected to Adam. It wasn't about the crash. Not entirely. This was about data. Surveillance. The real-time manipulation of behavioral tracking systems using predictive AI. If true, it meant someone had the power to change outcomes before they happened. And if Argus was involved, and Adam had been working with them, or for them, then maybe the flight incident was no fluke. Maybe it was a test. A proof of concept. Claire felt the floor beneath her tilt again. She hadn't just stumbled into a mystery. She'd uncovered a blueprint for control, one that blurred the line between safety and surveillance, between protection and manipulation. And someone, somewhere, had decided she was the variable they couldn't predict. But before she could make sense of any of it, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. It was a video file. No message, no sender. Just a timestamp and a file name. Confession_4-13. She tapped play, and the screen filled with static before a face came into view. It was Adam. But this time, he didn't look afraid. He looked guilty. Claire stared at the screen, her hands trembling as Adam's face flickered in and out of clarity, as if even the recording itself didn't want to be seen. He looked exhausted, not physically but emotionally, as if years of secrets had finally cracked open under the weight of guilt. There was a hollowness in his eyes that Claire had never seen before. He wasn't just confessing. He was unraveling. "If you're watching this," his voice began, strained and low, "then you already know too much. And I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for not telling you sooner, for everything I did to keep you from seeing the truth." Claire felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. He paused, took a shaky breath, and what he said next made her whole body go rigid. Argus isn't just software. It's not surveillance. It's a weapon, one they've tested on civilians, on commercial flights, on people we know, people we love. She pressed pause, unable to breathe. Her brother, her only real family, had just admitted to being part of a secret that was far bigger than she'd ever imagined. And yet, there was no triumph in the discovery. No satisfaction in finally being closer to the truth. Only dread. Only the realization that everything she believed, everything she trusted, had been carefully constructed to keep her blind. If Adam was involved from the start, if he'd stood silently while people were manipulated, if he'd used her as part of some sick experiment, what was left to believe in? Before she could unpause the video, her phone buzzed again. A new message, but this one wasn't anonymous. It was from Melissa, her childhood friend, her emergency contact, someone she hadn't spoken to in weeks. The text was brief, frantic. "Claire, I don't know what's going on, but 2 men were at my place asking about you. I didn't tell them anything, I swear. But they left a message. Stop digging or someone else gets hurt." Claire's heart thudded so hard she felt it in her teeth. Melissa had nothing to do with this. She'd just been a name, a fallback plan, a safe house. And now she was in danger. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just hers. They had spread, like a fire she couldn't contain. She grabbed her coat and ran out the laundromat's back entrance, slipping into the alley and trying not to break into a full sprint. Her mind raced with everything crashing down at once. Should she call Melissa? Warn her? Tell her to run? But if she reached out, they'd track it. Every move she made now had weight. Every decision could cost someone their life. And then there was the video, unfinished, unanswered, still pulsing like a live wire in her pocket. She found a diner and slid into a booth, ordering a coffee just to have a reason to sit. The waitress gave her a tired smile, oblivious to the storm swirling inside her. Claire reopened the video. Adam was speaking again, voice heavier now. I wanted to tell you, Claire. 1,000 times. But they watch everything. Every message, every call, every word. The day of the flight, when you saw me, I wasn't supposed to be there. I went rogue. I thought I could stop it, disable the system before it ran the program. But it was too late. The flight wasn't just delayed. The algorithm predicted unrest. A passenger was going to snap. And they let it happen, just to confirm their model worked. Claire nearly dropped the phone. She remembered the panic, the way the passengers had turned on each other during that delay, the yelling, the screaming, the sudden airport lockdown. She thought it was chaos, random and unexplainable. But now it seemed it was orchestrated, manipulated. Not just by people, but by predictive AI fed with enough data to anticipate and provoke human behavior, like a god playing chess. Then came the ultimatum. Adam's voice cracked. There's one more file. The root command. It's on a drive I hid at Dad's cabin in Vermont. If you get it, you can expose everything. But if you do, they'll know. They'll come for you. And if you don't, this keeps going. More tests. More victims. You have to choose. Claire sat frozen. The very idea of going back to that cabin was surreal. It had been their childhood sanctuary. Long summers spent running barefoot through the woods, toasting marshmallows by the lake, laughing until midnight. Now it was the key to unlocking a buried crime against humanity. But making that trip would mean lighting a signal flare. Whoever was behind Argus would see it as an act of war. She'd be hunted, not just digitally but physically. Then her phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call. From Melissa. She answered, her voice shaking. Mel. But it wasn't Melissa's voice that answered. It was a man's.
Calm.
Calculated. Unfamiliar. You're getting too close, Claire, he said, staring at her through the camera like he could see into her soul. Turn around now, or next time, it won't be a warning. The screen went black. Claire sat in the booth, the scent of burnt coffee and frying bacon filling her nose, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. She was out of time. Out of safe places. And the next decision she made could destroy everything, or finally reveal the truth. But as the bell over the diner door jingled and a man in a TSA jacket walked in, locking eyes with her across the room, she realized something chilling. She wasn't alone, and they were already watching. Claire barely had time to think before she bolted from the diner booth, her phone still gripped in one hand, her mind spinning faster than her legs could carry her. The man in the TSA jacket had followed her with his eyes like a hawk stalking prey, not surprised, not confused, just waiting. That stare didn't belong to someone who stumbled into the wrong breakfast spot. It was calculated. Claire slipped out the side door, took a sharp turn into a narrow alley, and disappeared into the grid of backstreets she knew too well from years of city living. Her breath came fast, clouding the cold morning air, but her focus was laser-sharp. Every step now wasn't just survival, it was war. She ducked into a stairwell, leaning hard against the wall, heart thundering against her ribs. It wasn't just her anymore. Melissa was in danger. Adam might be dead, or worse. And the video, the one she still hadn't finished, burned like a secret in her pocket. The scope of what she was unraveling had widened to a terrifying degree. The Argus system, once just a mysterious flight algorithm, had its tentacles wrapped around transportation, infrastructure, even emergency services. But the most gut-wrenching realization came when she noticed something about the man from the diner. He wasn't a stranger. Not completely. His eyes, his walk, even the way he had spoken during that brief message, they all triggered something buried deep in her memory. Claire opened her phone again, pulling up an old photo from a family wedding in upstate New York. She zoomed in past the smiling guests, the champagne glasses, and the flash of lights until she landed on a man in the corner of the frame. Her uncle's business partner. A longtime family friend. A man who used to send her birthday cards as a kid. His name was Thomas Neal, and he had worked in government contracting for decades. No one paid much attention to him, but now she saw it clearly. He was the handler. The cleaner. The man they sent when things started to fall apart. She sat down on the cold concrete step, suddenly feeling the full weight of it all. This wasn't just about one delayed flight. It wasn't just one algorithm or one experiment gone rogue. The Argus project was designed to run real-time psychological stress tests on the American public. Predict behavior. Shape responses. Trigger panic, then analyze it. Airports were only the beginning. It had spread to hospitals, major highways, stadiums. Anywhere people gathered. The system wasn't passive. It wasn't a warning tool. It was a manipulation engine. And people like Claire, journalists, whistleblowers, even curious citizens, were collateral damage in a much larger game. Desperate for clarity, she called the one person she thought she could still trust, Dana, a cybersecurity analyst she'd once worked with on an airline safety exposé. Dana had always been skeptical, cautious, paranoid even, but now that paranoia felt like a lifeline. Claire explained everything, her words coming in a flood of fear and urgency. For a long moment, Dana didn't say anything, just silence on the other end. Then finally, her voice came back, low and strained. "Claire, I've been watching too. And I think you're right. But if Neal is involved, you need to know something else. He's not just working for Argus. He's part of what used to be called the Warden Program. It's off books. Black budget. Rumored to be controlled by a private defense conglomerate that split off from DARPA. This goes way deeper than predictive analytics. They're building a framework for preemptive containment. Before crimes happen. Before chaos begins." Claire's head spun. This was worse than she imagined. Minority Report level tactics, except real, live, and in play on American soil. Dana sent a secure drop link and told Claire to upload any files she had. "Once I analyze the metadata," Dana said, "I'll trace the origin servers. Maybe we can find where the masternode is being run from." Claire nodded, ending the call, only to realize something chilling. Her phone battery was draining abnormally fast, even though it had been at 82% just minutes earlier. She switched it off, heart hammering in her chest. They were already tracking her. Then came the final betrayal. As Claire made her way toward the subway station, head down, hoodie up, blending into the Monday morning crowd, she spotted someone standing just ahead of the turnstiles. Someone she never expected to see. Officer Mitchell, the TSA agent who had helped calm the passengers during the flight delay. The man who had comforted a crying child, who had pulled Claire aside and said quietly, "Don't trust anyone but your gut." She'd remembered him as kind, grounded, safe. Now he stood at the entrance, eyes scanning the crowd like a security hawk, but when his gaze landed on her, there was no surprise. Just recognition. And resignation. He turned away, quickly, subtly, reaching up to his earpiece. Claire froze. He wasn't there by chance. He wasn't a hero. He was part of it. And she realized with a cold, nauseating certainty that the web she was caught in wasn't just made of technology or secrecy, it was made of people. People she'd shaken hands with, trusted, believed in, people who were everywhere. And every single one of them had a role to play. Suddenly, everything around her felt hostile. The subway announcer's robotic voice echoed like a warning. The faces in the crowd blurred into one faceless threat. And she knew, without question, the next move she made would decide everything. Whether the truth lived or died. But as she stepped onto the train, clutching her bag like it held the last hope left in the world, she also knew one thing for certain. She was done running. And they had just made a mistake. The train sliced through the underground like a silver bullet, but to Claire, it felt like a pressure cooker, each second winding tighter around her lungs. The flickering lights overhead pulsed in rhythm with her thoughts. Every friend, every memory, every unanswered question leading to this. The flash drive Dana decrypted revealed everything: encrypted communications between Neil and an internal branch of the Department of Homeland Security marked Project Odysseus. Hidden inside the dense code were behavioral prompts, predictive movement maps, and one chilling directive labeled Termination Protocol, C1. Her name was in the system. She wasn't just being followed, she was scheduled for elimination. Claire made her way through the city like a phantom, cutting across alleyways and avoiding cameras. She found Dana at a forgotten observatory, once used for educational programs and now shuttered for renovation. They needed elevation, isolation, and a direct line to the master tower they'd identified, an outdated broadcast antenna co-opted by Argus for closed-loop communications. Dana had the tools. Claire had the evidence. All that remained was to send it out, every file, every recording, every name. But Neil was already there. He stood calmly near the telescope dome, his coat flapping slightly in the wind that howled over the rooftop, as if he had all the time in the world. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not angry, but disappointed, as though Claire had let him down. "You don't understand what Argus is really about," he said. "You see control. I see prevention. You see shadows. I see light. The world is on the edge of collapse. Pandemics, civil unrest, AI instability, cyberattacks. This system ensures continuity." Claire shook her head, every muscle in her body tensing. "You're not saving anyone. You're engineering fear. You're playing God with people's lives." Neil's expression barely changed. He pulled something from his coat, a small, sleek device the size of a car fob. A remote. "You could walk away," he offered, holding it out like a truce. "No one would ever know. This never becomes public. No fallout. You go back to your life, Claire. Or you press send and the country goes into chaos by morning. Are you ready for that weight?" It wasn't just a threat. It was the truth. The files were volatile. Names of high-ranking officials, companies involved in the testing, maps of behavior simulations across cities like Atlanta, Chicago, New York. The public backlash would be instant, explosive, irreversible. Claire hesitated. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about what kind of world she believed in. But before she could answer, Dana stepped forward, her eyes burning with something deeper than fear. "You always thought you could predict everyone's next move," she said quietly. "But you never understood the human element." Then she grabbed the device from Neil's hand and smashed it against the ground. Neil lunged. The brief scuffle that followed wasn't cinematic or graceful. It was raw, clumsy, brutal. Claire fought with everything she had: adrenaline, grief, rage. Somewhere in the tangle of limbs, Neil's elbow cracked Dana's jaw, and she hit the deck hard. Claire took a punch to the ribs that nearly knocked the wind from her, but in that moment, her hand found the transmitter cable. She slammed it into the backup satellite relay. The data surged. Across the U.S., screens flickered. Phones, tablets, TVs, newsrooms began pinging. Journalists who had been silenced, families who had lost loved ones to unexplained detainments, even conspiracy theorists who had once been dismissed. Suddenly, they all had the proof. Neil stopped mid-strike, his face blanching as notifications began to light up his smartwatch. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered. But Claire wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring at Dana, who had pulled herself up using the base of the telescope. Blood on her lip, a tear in her eye, but something else, an expression Claire hadn't expected. Guilt. "I didn't know how far they would go," Dana said, her voice cracking. "I thought I was helping expose them, but I was feeding them. Every time I traced a packet or flagged a vulnerability, they used it to refine the system. I was their backdoor." The rooftop seemed to tilt beneath Claire's feet. All along, her only ally had also been a part of the machine. The data dump couldn't be stopped now, it was global, irreversible. But Claire's victory felt hollow, wrapped in betrayal. As sirens began to wail in the distance, and helicopters traced patterns in the sky, Neil turned and walked toward the edge of the building, calm, composed, whispering something into his watch that Claire couldn't hear. Moments later, he was gone, swallowed into the chaos below. Whether he jumped or escaped, no one knew. Claire looked out across the city, the wind lashing against her face. Everything had changed. Not just for her, but for the country. The truth was out. The questions were only beginning. And somewhere, beneath all the headlines and protests that would follow, a new system was likely already being written. Because control doesn't die. It adapts, and Claire knew she'd have to fight again. For weeks, the nation buzzed with unrest, the truth spreading faster than anyone could contain. Protests formed outside federal buildings, hashtags like #ProjectOdysseus, #DigitalControl, and #WeSeeYou trended on every major social platform. Leaks sparked nightly news specials. YouTube creators dove deep with frame-by-frame breakdowns, and conspiracy channels that had once seemed ridiculous were suddenly quoted in mainstream discussions. The weight of it all pressed against Claire like a rising tide. She was the source, the spark, the voice behind the leak that cracked the entire system open. But instead of relief, what she felt most was the exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep could cure, but the deeper kind, the emotional burn that comes from learning too much too quickly about how the world actually works. She found temporary refuge in a cabin in upstate New York, an old place her mother used to talk about, one that still had a fireplace, a landline, and a record player that only worked if you nudged the needle just right. It wasn't escape. It was distance. Space to think, to breathe, to decide who she was now that the world knew her name. The authorities never came for her. Whether out of fear of public outcry or because someone higher up had made a silent call to let it go, she was left alone. The people she feared most, the ones who had once marked her for deletion, had gone to ground. Neil was never seen again, and while there were rumors he had taken a private jet to a country without extradition, others swore he was living under an alias in Nevada, working for a cybersecurity startup. Dana, scarred but not broken, had gone radio silent. She sent one encrypted message weeks later. What we exposed was only phase 1. Keep your eyes open. Claire didn't respond. She didn't know if she could trust her again. Maybe she never really had. But even as her finger hovered over the reply key, something in her gut said it wasn't over between them, just paused. Some questions got answers. Project Odysseus was officially denied by the government, but a series of anonymous whistleblower documents confirmed its existence and laid bare its true purpose. Not surveillance, but manipulation. Behavioral prediction wasn't just a tool for safety, it was being used to guide stock markets, sway public sentiment before elections, and even fuel predictive arrests in communities labeled unstable. Claire's revelation had put the program in lockdown, but the infrastructure remained. Stripped down, repainted, renamed, but still very much alive. In her cabin, she read through thousands of messages, people thanking her, people blaming her, people begging her to expose more. She didn't answer most of them. She didn't want to be anyone's savior. She had already lost too much chasing shadows. Her father's silence, the fracture in her friendships, the constant second-guessing of every word spoken by those closest to her, it all came at a cost she hadn't understood until it was too late. But something shifted one morning as she stood by the lake and watched the fog roll over the water. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel hunted. She didn't feel like a target. She felt present. There was no breaking news ticker across the sky, no vibration in her pocket with another urgent headline. Just quiet. Still, as she packed up her bag weeks later and boarded a quiet train heading south, she carried one final hard drive, a backup of everything that had never been released. The redacted files. The identities buried beneath layers of false data. The real architects. And one folder labeled Vanguard, which neither she nor Dana had ever managed to decode. She wasn't sure when she'd open it, or if she ever would. But deep down, she knew she might have to. Because systems like this don't die easily. They evolve, hide, and wait. And somewhere, someone was already building the next version, smarter, quieter, more untraceable. Claire didn't know if she was ready to fight again. But she knew this. The truth had a way of surfacing. No matter how deep it was buried, no matter who tried to erase it. As the train curved along the Hudson, Sunlight cracked through the window, casting a flicker across her reflection. For the first time in months, she smiled, not because it was over, but because she had survived. And whatever came next, she'd be ready. Or at least, she'd never look away again.